Good afternoon. Welcome all to Z-Day Belgium. This event is organized by the Zeitgeist Movement from Belgium. It's part of the global Zeitgeist Movement. As you probably know, the Zeitgeist Movement is a sustainability advocacy group. Our movement's activism is explicitly based on non-violent communication, and the focus lies on educating the public about the root causes of our personal, social, and ecological problems. The Zeitgeist Movement also informs about problem-solving potential that science and technology enables, but unfortunately it does get unapplied due to the barriers inherent in our established social system. Since 2009, the Zeitgeist Movement has been having Z-Days all over the world in more than 70 countries. The goal of a Z-Day is to increase public awareness of our movement and the potential for a new society. Our Z-Day today is especially about dialogue and transition. Dialogue in the sense that everyone will be able to participate and bring up certain topics. And transition because of our wonderful guest speakers and the possible paths that they will explain to us to show how we can transition to a better world. Our program today, first we'll be starting with a presentation of basic income by Christina Lambrecht, after which there will be a Q&A and a dialogue about this transition method. Then we'll have a short break. You can, as you see, buy beverages and snacks at the bar. After the break, Jean Lievens will give a presentation about the P2P Foundation, also followed by a Q&A, and our last topic of today is the People's Voice, where you can give your thoughts on certain topics or even bring up subjects. Now, how to present Christina? Well, her Flemish and her German roots and her French-speaking family-in-law gave her the perfect Belgian profile to represent Belgium during the European Citizens Initiative for Basic Income between 14 January 2013 and 14 January 2014. She likes to present herself as a self-made woman. Today she is retired and spends her time with her 4 grandchildren and lives with her husband in Namur. Before her retirement, she was active as a tourist guide, translator, interpreter, and she speaks Dutch, French, German, and English. Her former public relations activities learned her how to promote as best as possible the stuff she believes in. So today she will be promoting basic income. Her life experiences in Africa, Germany, United States, Russia, and Belgium gave her a broad view of the world and of its many cultures. Yet, she does not want to pin herself on a specific idea, and she looks to basic income from her gut feeling. Therefore, she asks us to do the same thing today. She always says basic income has nothing to do with dogma, but is an opportunity to support a transition to change. Please welcome Christina Lambrecht.
Thank you for this introduction.
That's no problem. I would like to say you that in fact you are blowing me away. Tomorrow it's Easter. Normally the most people are at home preparing dinner for tomorrow or going on a nice journey, and you're coming here for me. Well, I'm very grateful. And I would like to say thank you, Joris, for this invitation, because as I don't remember the name of the young man.
Arne.
I'm not busy in a dogmatical way, I'm just a messenger. And so every opportunity to talk about basic income is a good opportunity. But before starting this talk, I would like to share with you a kind of inconvenient truth. The misunderstanding surrounding the idea of basic income remains very large. And opponents of the basic income idea like to keep the smoke as thick as possible. They try to use what I call the fear strategy and accuse us, the supporters of basic income, of propaganda, of spreading the idea in a dogmatically way. And they do not hesitate to even accuse us that we are engaged in a kind of new religion. Maybe you read some of the posts, the reactions I have on Facebook, and that's what quite often happens. Yes. So then I try to ask them, of course, okay, maybe I am wrong, for I do not have the monopoly on the truth. And then they close their ranks, but bring no good arguments that can contribute to the enrichment of the debate. Of course, they say, yes, we are studying basic income, and soon we will bring out all the pros and the cons. But, as I know, very seldom these cons are constructive. You can have critics, but you can also be constructive. And sometimes I do have the strange feeling that they are reinventing the hot water, but that this water should flow through their channels because they don't want to lose their own old achievements. Or, as Niccolo Machiavelli put it very sharply, it must be remembered that there is nothing more difficult to plan, more doubtful for success, no more dangerous to manage than a new system. For the initiator has the enmity of all who would profit by the preservation of the old institution, and merely lukewarm defenders in those who gain by the new ones. And I tell them, to the opponents, and I tell it to everyone, I am not a university professor, I am not an economist, I am not a philosopher. In fact, I am, like you, probably a citizen who is seeking for change. So yes, I never will say that basic income is the only and one solution to our problems. Of course, I like to think that some of the problems we meet, like climate change, are linked together, and that we should be interested in solutions like degrowth, like sustainable and more frugal economy. I think that the Zeitgeist is about this too. But to have this change, we need also a strong and simple tool towards a complete change of the system out of the short-term consumerism. And here I would like to quote Michel Bouwens from the Peer-to-Peer, who wrote, in fact, with Jean Lievens, who will be later here in the afternoon, who wrote this book, De Wereld Redden, and he gives quite a lot of interesting ideas. And Michel, he once said, the underlying issue is how gradual, how smooth, how bearable transition can be. And how can we support those who gain a taste for frugality and its advantages and take the plunge into a different way of life? It's indeed a very, very big challenge. And that's where, to me, basic income might come in. I also told you I'm not an economist. So for those who are preparing calculators, I won't answer the questions about how to finance basic income. I can tell you it's possible, and people more clever than I, the economists, they already did the calculation exercise. But what we really need, and that's in fact why I am calling myself the messenger of basic income, what we really need, and this I would like to say in Dutch because it is linked to our Belgian politics, and probably you all will remember this, we need 5 minuten politieke moed. 5 minutes of political courage. Our policymakers only talk about gross national product because that's how they measure how economically rich we are. And so it's always linked to work, production and consumption. Gross national product measures everything, except that what is not worthwhile, like health, education, self-development, having enough free time to do something else than working, producing, consuming. Yet when you talk about transition and change towards a system that makes life worthwhile, and you talk about the gross national happiness, maybe you heard about it. You have this little country in Bhutan, in the Himalaya, and there they are thinking, measuring the wealth and the health of the people by gross national happiness. When you talk about gross national happiness instead of gross national product, and you propose basic income, you'll discover soon how difficult it is. People are so afraid for the unknown and prefer to push always forwards the challenges they are confronted with. Because in fact, they are always afraid of losing old achievements. So, to me, basic income means in the first place, a change of mentality, a kind of switch towards a new sustainable system, and therefore we need to build awareness, basic income awareness. Now you are going to say, what is she telling there? In Belgium, for example, a national basic income could be a politically viable program 20 years down the road, but only if it can become a more mainstream concept in the nearer future. Our politicians need to begin addressing basic income as a legitimate idea and start talking about how it might work. We need to build awareness so that elected officials and the general population know what basic income is and what problems it could solve. We need policy experts to think about scenarios for how it could be practically implemented. And we eventually need to set up city and statewide experiments in Belgium in the same way the Netherlands are starting now, so that we validate its effectiveness in a real domestic environment. But there is always a but. The NIMBY factor. Not in my backyard. When I talk about basic income, most people say, wow, that's a great idea. And then they ask me, yes, but what I am going to lose in this new kind of system? Or they say, you repeated it already when we discussed together, or they say, that's fine, but aren't you going to create an army of lazy losers? So I like to compare basic income with the national lottery in Belgium, Win for Life. Say €1,000 a month. And then people say, and that's always very strange, oh, if I win this lottery, there will be no much change in my life. I'll continue to work, maybe a little bit less. I will do something else because I don't like my actual bullshit job. I'll create something, I realize a dream, I buy something for my children or for my home, and so on and so on. So lottery, and I don't understand it because lottery is based on luck, huh? But lottery seems to bring only positive, constructive and trustworthy vibes. People feel in fact zen with lottery. No one is telling me when my neighbor wins the lottery €1,000 a month, well, he become a lazy loser. No one is telling me that. But as soon I do ask the same question about €1,000 a month, basic income, confidence in the other disappears like snow in the sun. Oh. My neighbor having this basic income, €1,000, lazy loser he will be. That's the mentality. In fact, we need trust, confidence. And now, let's start with very bad news. Robots are stealing our jobs. You hear it every day, I think. Especially on Facebook, I see everyday posts. This is automated. Yesterday, I listened, or 2 days ago, I listened to a radio program, Radio 1, from Belgium, from the VRT. And there was this young man, I think a scientist, who explains in simple words science about science. And he was also a little bit talking about the peer-to-peer activities who are growing everywhere. And he said to me, he said in the radio, and I thought it was very funny, right now I am creating a little robot so he can go at the bakery on Sunday and go and buy my pistolets, je ne sais pas comment on dit en anglais, little breads, so I can stay in my bed. That's robot. Huh? So some say, oh no, this is science fiction, but it really shouldn't. It's not science fiction. It's in fact happening every day. Jobs are disappearing. And no, I'm not talking about lovely Wall-E. Have you seen this movie? My grandchildren, Wall-E is their hero. So don't talk bad about him. No, I don't talk about Wall-E and this kind of robots. I'm talking about the robots who are stealing our jobs by automating. And then some will say, yes, okay, automation, jobs are stolen, but automation of low-skilled jobs will create new, higher-skilled jobs. Yes, of course, it will, always again. But never enough to give again full-time jobs to everyone. And even higher-skilled jobs are at risk today and start to be handled more and more by computer programs. So yes, robots taking our jobs, in fact it's a devastating blow, especially in a full employment economy. Inequality and poverty will increase, as well the huge amount of pressure and stress on our social welfare systems for the unemployed, which were designed to support that number of people for extended periods of time. So, some questions. What if we would no longer focus on full employment? What if it was just okay to not have a full-time position? What if robots stealing our jobs could actually be a good thing, rather than something to fear? That's the thinking behind basic income. At first blush, of course, basic income may seem very similar to the existing social programs. providing assistance to help those who are struggling. But there is a key difference. Basic income would be considered as a fundamental right, rather than a form of welfare. This would eliminate any stigma that might exist for programs that are designed for those in need. And it is very simple, because basic income would be provided to every adult, to every one of you. And because it just involves sending you a fixed payment to people every month, it would be much simpler to run and require less bureaucracy than other social programs. But let me also give you the 4 criteria for basic income as accepted by BIEN, the Basic Income Earth Network. The definition to Basic Income Earth Network for basic income is universal, individual, unconditional, and high enough. So basic income has to be high enough to live on, without needing any supplemental funds. That means that you could be able to get by even if you lost your job. And there wouldn't be immediate pressure to find a new one as quickly as possible. Having full-time employment would no longer be a mandatory. And what's more, this one I like, what's more, recent studies have shown that anxiety around poverty reduces brain power, which means that the guarantee of basic income would actually make people smarter. Now, some are wondering whether or not we should first start with basic income at the European level. We see today, indeed, overwhelming evidence that the economic and austerity policies of the European Union have a devastating impact on the lives of many Europeans. And they often lead to a situation in which people have very little control over their own lives. A growing number of people are confronted with an everyday of life financial restrictions and a fading hope of seeing personal and professional efforts recognized. So yes, with the objective of an unconditional basic income for each European citizen, it would be possible to set, in fact, a positive process in motion, allowing everyone the opportunity of participation in working towards the common goals as stated in the European Constitution and in the Declaration of Human Rights. So let me have some few words about the European basic income idea as proposed by Philippe van Parijs, in fact the founder of BIEN. And he calls it the Euro dividend. It consists of paying a modest basic income. He proposes, I think, €200 to every legal resident of the European Union, or at least of the subset of member states that either have adopted the euro or are committed to do so. This income provides each resident with a universal and unconditional floor, een basis, that can be supplemented at will by labor income, capital income, and social benefits. Its level can vary from country to country to track the cost of living, and it can be lower for the young and higher for the elderly. And it has to be financed by the value-added tax. But I leave it to you to Google Philippe van Parijs and Eurodividend to learn more about it. Yet sometimes I like to think this would be a nice idea for Greece, for example. Basic income pilot projects have proven that it works. So why not Instead of suffocating Greece and all these other countries, member states in need, with unrealistic demands and impossible obligations, start a European pilot project for basic income. But, as I say, it's like wishful thinking. Joris, you asked me to give some history about basic income. But you know, every time when the basic income idea bubbled up again in history, it was always in its own contemporary context. Some days ago, I did read a quote. That's why Facebook is very nice. You have everyday quotes of people passing by. This one I selected. Some days ago, I did read a quote coming from US President Theodore Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States. And I would like to share it with you. In his annual message to the Congress in January 11, 1944, and in a fireside chat to the American people the same evening, he stated, "We now do realize the fact that true individual freedom cannot exist without economic security and independence. Men in need are not free men. People who are hungry and out of a job are the stuff of which dictatorships are made. And only, and this one I like, and only when men have hours of labor short enough, he will, after his day's work is done, have time and energy to bear his share in the management of community and to help carrying the general load." It sounds indeed like music in my basic income ears. And I think for the Zeitgeist maybe too. Work less and basic income. That's what the future should be about. And although the context of history and time was completely different, Thomas Paine already pronounced similar words during the French Revolution, some 150 years earlier. "No income, no citizen," he claimed in 1792 at the National Assembly. The French Revolution was just broken out, but Thomas Paine warned his fellow revolutionaries. "Democracy, friends, can only work well when citizens are economically free and available to make flourish her." And today we have Professor Guy Standing. I met him on Wednesday. One of the co-founders of Basic Income Earth Network. He says exactly the same in his book, A Precariat Charter from Denizen to Citizen. The term precariat was originally used to denote temporary and seasonal workers. But now, with labor insecurity, a feature of most Western economies, it is the perfect word for a great mass of people, flanked by an army of unemployed and a detached group of socially ill misfits who enjoy almost none of the benefits won by organized labor during the 20th century. In Standing's view, they increasingly resemble denizen rather than citizen, people with restricted rights, largely living towards the bottom of a tired membership model of society. So the idea of basic income bubbled up a long time and still keeps bubbling up. But what I notice today is that it gets more and more interest and followers. So maybe Victor Hugo was right. He said, "Nothing is as powerful as an idea whose time has come." We all know him as a novelist, dramatist, poet. But do we know this about him? In 1848, Hugo was elected to the parliament as a conservative. In 1849, he broke with the conservatives, when he gave a noted speech calling for the end of misery and poverty. In other progressive speeches, he called for the universal suffrage and free education for all children. And Hugo's advocacy to abolish the death penalty was renowned internationally and is again very actual. So it's in fact all about the Zeitgeist, Joris.
Yes.
And not only the Zeitgeist, but also about strong men and women who are not afraid for the unknown and believe that progress is the realization of utopias. Or, as Oscar Wilde said, a map of the world that does not include utopia is not even worth glancing at, for it leaves out the one country at which humanity is always landing. And when humanity lands there, it looks out for better countries. And seeing a better country, sets sail. Today, Joris, I think, Zeitgeist is in transition. The momentum for change has come. And we live in a very exciting zeitgeist. I would even say we live at the crossroads of old and new. And that's of course always full of suspense. Which direction to choose? What legacy we would take from the past? And we should leave to not burden our choice of direction towards the future. So let's have a little talk about the Belgian social security. In fact, I like to think that at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, social security was also a kind of utopia progressing in the mind of some people. But then suddenly it was realized. And it was greatly expanded thanks to the labor unions. But today we are in a very, very different situation. At the crossroad of a changing labor market in which we are becoming, in fact, prosumers. This word was coined in the 80s by futurist Alvin Toffler in his book The Third Wave, as a blend of producer and consumer. He used it to describe a possible future type of consumer who would become involved in the design and the production of goods, thanks to the 3D printer, for example. He argued that we then no longer would be a passive market upon which industry dumped consumer goods, but a part of the creative process. So our social security needs an urgent update. And whether you call it basic income, citizen income, transition income, citizen dividend, it's all about advancing equality and economic participation while enabling and emancipating simpler welfare systems. Today, in fact, we are already in very modern times. Today, a solar-powered plane. What happens?
Nothing. Okay.
Today, a solar-powered plane, the Solar Impulse, is flying around the world. Without fuel, only sun energy. We discovered that Jupiter's moon, Ganymede, has a salty ocean with more water than on Earth. So, in fact, Oscar Wilde was right. Progress is the realization of utopias. We first learned how to make fire, or to use fire. And this was a very huge step forward. And I think, in fact, that some of our far-off ancestors at the first fire burned their fingers. So this unknown new discovery for sure was not immediately appreciated by all. Some might have said, "Oh, forget about it. Let's remain deeply enough in our cave. It's warm there and it's safe." But soon they knew this unknown possibility, this fire, not only keeps us warm, brings safety, but a mammoth burger on barbecue tasted so much better. And so men kept going on, always on and on, progressing from crossroad to crossroad, setting sails for newer and better countries. We are leaving now, today, the era of petrol, in which we made cars and aircraft, and we live in a more and more internet-connected world. And what's next? Are we entering the peer-to-peer revolution towards a collaboration prosumer economy? But I suppose that Jean will explain more about it later. Since I'm invited by the Zeitgeist Movement, I wanted to have a few words about Jacques Fresco. And I would like to use a quote. For those who don't know Jacques Fresco, he was an American futurist. He also is known for the Venus Project with resource-based economy ideas, I think.
Yes.
And he also featured in the movie Zeitgeist Addendum.
Yes, and moving forward.
And
also.
moving forward,
Oh,
I don't know, but
yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
Where his ideas of the future were given as possible alternatives. Now he said, today we have access to highly advanced technologies, but our social and economic system has not kept up with our technological possibilities that could easily create a world of abundance free of servitude and debt. Yet too many of us continue to believe that some miracle technology will make growth always possible, again and again, and thus postpone the need for change because they think there is no alternative and that growth, in fact, is the only solution. So, my proposal is basic income as a possible alternative. As I said in the beginning, the idea is very simple. Everyone in society receives a regular income simply for being alive, because you are there. And yet, let me ask you this. Would our lives be better? Would they have more meaning if we knew we are working together as a species toward common goals, without the fear of an income security? To me, the answer is yes. What if we start really working together towards these common goals, designing our worldwide society for the benefit of all? And here I use the word common. And maybe you heard already about the commons. And again, I give it to Jean to talk about it, because to me, the commons, the peer-to-peer and collaboration economy both fit perfectly together. But what I would like to say about it, the contributors who create these common values, like Wikipedia and so on, and share it with all of us, they don't have any income security. With a guaranteed basic income, the individual would have easier access to a range of human activities, and thus, in fact, it will encourage work. A guaranteed basic income that is high enough to ensure an existence in dignity and participation in society, enables you to make your own free choices, as well in private life in your peer-to-peer or prosumers activities or on the formal labor market. In fact, it evens out life chances and choices. And choice is to me as the muse of creativity. Human beings are not short of activities, but rather of recognition and freedom and financial security. But here's another quote from Jacques Fresco. If you think we can't change the world, it just means you are not one that will. Today, the zeitgeist is a bit of gloomy. And as I said, we are on the crossroad of old and new. It gives an uncertain feeling. How to deal with the unknown? Well, in fact, I'm quite positive about it. Humanity comes from far and still has to go a long way. And we always learn by trial and error. And no one has a crystal ball, of course, but the future starts today, not tomorrow. Jeremy Rifkin, author of the Third Industrial Revolution, said, "Basic income is not a utopia, it is a practical business plan for the next step of human journey." Tomorrow we are celebrating Easter. And Easter is about being people you love. And I love being with you. Thank you. Leg ik hier staan of...
We zetten Max al.
Ja, ik ga een beetje thee drinken.